Hello again, readers and writers. Today we're doing a very special book that's going to teach us about quotation marks. Now, in case we forgot, quotation marks are those little marks that we put around what somebody says. So let's see what we do with quotation marks in this book. It's called The Mystery of the Missing Socks by Justin McCory Martin, illustrated by Kelly Kennedy. It's got these little bubbles right here. Let's read the bubble first. This book is about quotation marks. Do you ever use them in your writing? When? Hi, my name is Steve Scoop, and I'm a reporter for the Hoppleton Evening Herald. My job is to talk to people and write down what they say. I have 3 important tools: my notebook, my pencil, and quotation marks. I've just received a hot tip. Mr. McGillicuddy is missing a pair of polka dot socks. My boss wants me to write a story about it for the newspaper. Get the story. So since she said get the story, do you think he's going to put quotation marks around it? Let's find out. Look at that. She said, get the story, said the boss. Quotation marks surround a person's word. That way you know exactly what they said. So it's surrounding it in the beginning of what she said and at the end of what she said. Kind of like a hug. So I've written down what my boss said in my notebook. I used quotation marks. Don't they look like they're capturing the words? That's what quotation marks do. They're used to show exactly what somebody said. Steve, you don't have to write down every word I say. Oops, my boss just told me to stop writing down every word she says. I had better get to work. My first stop is the scene of the crime, Mr. McGillicuddy's backyard. Let's go. My socks disappeared. Mr. McGillicuddy tells me that around 9 a.m. he hung his wash on the clothesline to dry, but when he went out to get it at 11:30 a.m., his favorite pair of polka dot socks had disappeared. So look, he wrote down, my socks just disappeared, said Mr. McGillicuddy. So see, he's hugging his words with the quotation marks, where he first started and where he ended. When you quote people, you have the choice of putting their name at the beginning, middle, or the end of the sentence. This time, Steve chose to put it at the end, said Mr. McGillicuddy. He could also say, Mr. McGillicuddy said, my socks just disappeared. Or he could do, my socks, said Mr. McGillicuddy, just disappeared. So that's kind of fun. See, I've written down exactly what Mr. McGillicuddy said. I placed his comments inside quotation marks. I wonder if his neighbors noticed anything suspicious. I better go investigate. I'd bet my hat it was Harold. Now I'm talking to Miss Slice. She's given me a really great tip. I bet my hat it was Harold, she said. And here he wrote that down. I bet my hat, said Miss Slice, that it was Harold. So because we put it in the middle this time, we have to hug both of the pieces. So he hugged the first part of what she said with quotation marks, and he hugged the second part of what she said with a quotation marks. Like your arms are wrapping around the words. And then he put her name in the middle so we know who said it. I want to remember Miss Slice's comment, so I wrote down exactly what she said. I've got to find out more about this Harold. Can you believe Harold chased me down the street? Then helped himself to a bunch of my letters. Here's Mike Monty, the mail carrier. He knows the suspect all right. Some pretty alarming things to say about him. Let's see how he wrote it down. So this time he chose to put the name of the person at the end. And then he hugged the beginning and the end with quotation marks. Can you believe Harold chased me down the street, then helped himself to a bunch of letters? Asked Mr. Mike Monty. This is incredible. Boy, I wrote down every word. This Harold sounds like a real bully. One more thing they're showing us here is, see that punctuation, that question mark? Do you see how it's inside? It's not on the outside of the hug. We're actually hugging his question. So the question mark goes inside the quotation mark. I wonder who this Harold is. He sounds nasty. I just saw Harold running toward the park. Now I'm talking to a girl named Jenny Jennings. She's 10 years old. Jenny says that just a few minutes ago, she spotted Harold running towards the park. So let's write down what Jenny says. This time he's putting her name at the beginning. 10-year-old Jenny Jennings said, I just saw Harold running toward the park. And again, look at that punctuation. It's inside of our hug, so we know how to say it. She said it with some expression. The park! Yeah, excitement. So very important that the punctuation for our end of our sentence goes inside of our quotation hug. Jenny gave me a really great lead, so I wrote it down. I'm hot on Harold's trail now. I'm going to catch him. Arf, arf! What have we here? There's a pair of polka dot socks lying on the ground. They are right beside a dog. Let's see if I can make out the name on his tag. Just as I suspected, Harold. Looks like I located the polka dot sock thief. Look, he's quoting the dog now. So the dog said, arf, arf. So he hugged his words, and then he wrote, said Harold the dog. To keep your writing interesting, you can find other words for said. You could use something like shouted, screamed, barked. So instead of said, I would put barked here. Arf, arf, barked Harold the dog. You could do whispered, maybe something whispered to you. So lots of words we could use instead of said. Naturally, I wrote down Harold's statement. Looks like the case of Mr. McGillicuddy's missing socks is officially closed. Now I have to write the whole story. So here's his whole story, and we're going to see where he used quotation marks to write down what people said. Missing Sock, Mystery Solved by Steve Scoop. Mr. Clyde McGillicuddy lost a pair of socks today at approximately 9 a.m. He hung them on his clothesline to dry. Then, when he went to get them at 11:30 a.m., they had vanished. My socks just disappeared! So see there, he used his quotation marks to show that someone was talking. So it says right here, it starts, my, see the beginning of our hug, socks just disappeared. We got our exclamation point, and then the end of our hug. Exclaimed Mr. McGillicuddy. A neighbor, Miss Enid Slice, suggested a likely sock snatcher. I'd bet my hat, she said, that it was Harold. So this time he put it in the middle. So he's got his quote at the beginning, I'd bet my hat, another quote, she said, starting the quote again, that it was Harold, ending quote. Very cool. Mr. Mike Monty, the mail carrier, agreed, saying that Harold often gives him trouble. Here's another quote. See, we're starting our quote. Can you believe Harold chased me down the street and helped himself to a bunch of letters? Asked Mr. Monty. So instead of said, he said asked, because there's a question right there. That's a cool. It's hard to believe, but this reporter was determined to find the footwear fiend. Jenny Jennings, age 10, provided a helpful clue. Okay, here's another quote. So he's starting what she said with a quotation mark. I just saw Harold running toward the park, she reported. Ooh, so instead of she said, he said she reported because she's reporting it to him. That's cool. Upon arriving at the park, a pair of polka dot socks were spotted lying on the ground. Nearby was a small dog. According to his name tag, he was Harold. Mystery solved. Asked what he had to say for himself, Harold replied, and again we got quotation marks, arf, arf. In a late-breaking development, the socks had been returned to Mr. McGillicuddy. He promptly put them on and was very happy. So, that was our book about how to use quotation marks in your writing. So anytime you want to say something and somebody said it, make sure you give it a quotation hug and wrap their words around. Keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you next time.